A gun control group is literally trying to raise money from the blood of Las Vegas shooting victims. A group called Stop Handgun Violence sent flyers to the White House and members of Congress, inviting them to, quote, wipe the blood off your hands and end mass shootings. They also sent the flyer out to reporters. The flyers show images of the Las Vegas shooting, one of which is so gory that we blurted out on the screen. It's a very clear picture of a woman lying dead on the ground, covered in blood. Mark Glaze is a senior advisor to Guns Down. He supports gun control. He joins us tonight. So, Mark, look, I welcome a rational conversation on any topic that might reduce violence, including guns.
Right.
But this isn't an attempt to change minds or to come to an actual solution. This is an attempt to make money off of people's deaths.
Well, look, if this group is trying to raise money this way, I think that's a bad idea. But my only objection, if they're just trying to make members of Congress see these images, is that these images were not graphic enough. They're not as graphic as the average mass shooting.
But what would we learn? That shooting people is bad? I mean, I think everybody agrees with that. I mean, it's not. It's not about teaching anybody anything or having people confront the horror. Everyone understands the horror.
No, I actually don't think they do. I mean, I think the problem with gun violence, and it's not different from a lot of different crime problems, is that people see it as a statistic. It's like numbers on a page, or they see the sanitized version that we see on the nightly news or on Hollywood movies. When people actually see how devastating any shooting is, but particularly a mass shooting, I mean, I've seen it, and it is shocking. It will force you to think differently about it.
And by the way, this mass shooting's been basically ignored. We're going to Las Vegas tomorrow because we think it's worth figuring out why this happened.
Right.
So I disagree with your premise that people don't understand how horrible it is. They saw it on television. What I'm bothered by is this is not an effort to propose a solution. It's an effort to demonize people they disagree with. Wipe the blood off your hands. Whose hands? Whose hands have blood on them from this shooting?
Well, I think in the view of the people who sponsored this ad, it's people who sort of express thoughts and prayers for the victims when this kind of thing happens.
So
but
if
then
you pray for the victims, you've got blood on your hands?
No, we all pray for the victims. But then after that, if you're
we all don't actually pray for the victims.
Well,
a lot of people attacked the idea of praying for the victims.
Well, I do. But then after that, you actually look for a solution like, what about universal background checks? What about banning assault weapons that have no use in self-defense or in hunting?
Okay, so what is the solution in this case? I mean, presumably there are solutions that aren't related to confiscating people's guns or violating their Second Amendment rights. I mean, presumably there are solutions around mental health, for example. But those are of no interest to stop handgun violence. By the way, there were no handguns even used here, whatever. This is like not even related to their supposed mission. But the point is, they only want to talk about what law on the books would have prevented this?
Well, look, in fairness, they did talk about two things. One was background checks was not an issue in this shooting, but they also said we ought to ban assault weapons, and the fact that this guy had a lot of assault weapons.
They said that we renew the federal ban on military-style assault weapons.
Right.
So we had the assault weapons ban.
Right.
It didn't show any decrease in crime during the 10 years it was in place.
No, not quite true.
It would not, I think that's pretty conclusive. It would not have prevented this because these guns are already in private hands. There are like 100 million of them that are. And so what would be the legislative solution? I've asked this question to like 30 people. Nobody has an answer. They'd rather grandstand and call other people murderers than actually try to find a solution. What's the solution?
Well, you and I have had this conversation, and I'll again say something that a lot of people on my side don't want to say because people will yell at them for it. But the fact is, we need to have fewer guns, and we need to talk about banning entire classes of especially dangerous firearms like assault weapons. And I think we have to talk about not just banning them, but requiring that people allow the government to buy them back.
So universal gun confiscation is what you're talking about.
No, not universal gun confiscation.
You're saying ban a class of firearms. So that would be any rifle with, a capacity of more than one above a certain caliber. I mean, I don't know what the criteria are that you're suggesting, but basically any gun that you would use for deer hunting would be banned.
No, I would make a distinction between long guns that are technically semi-automatic, of the kind like my dad uses to hunt, and semi-automatic assault weapons that
to gun owners and hunters like me, these are meaningless distinctions, but let me just get right to the meat of it. What do you do to people who won't sell them back?
I think you at a bare minimum sort of fine them severely for it and build an incentive for them to sell them.
You ready for the civil war that would ensue when you try and take people's guns? Oh, I'm serious.
Well, I mean, I take it seriously, but as you just said, we banned these things for 10 years, and the country did not go up in flames.
We didn't ban them. Actually, you couldn't sell certain guns, but people had them. I had one at home. Nobody came and took it from me.
So how about half measures? Let's do this. Let's reimpose the ban on all new sales.
The one that didn't work.
On all new sales, and over time, the supply will dry up.
All right. Mark, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you're a liberal or have friends who are, you've probably heard of the mythical land of Canada. It's way freer and better than our dumb, oppressive country, plus better health care. You may have heard all about it. Well, last week, Canadian Stephen Ledrew came on this show to defend sensitivity training on behalf of what he described as the LGBTTTIQQAAPP community, or something close to that. In response, his employer suspended him for a week. Why? Because he dared come on this program. So we want to have him on tonight to tell us about it, but he had to cancel at the last minute because he said he would be fired if he sets foot in a Fox News studio ever again. And that's a fair punishment, we suppose, for trying to escape, even briefly, the overwhelming freedom of Canada. Supreme Court handed the White House a meaningful victory today. It ruled that a travel ban affecting 8 countries can go into immediate effect. That decision isn't final. Instead, it simply means the ban, which affects Iran, Sudan, Libya, Chad, North Korea, Somalia, Yemen, can remain in place while the courts evaluate whether or not it's legal. Of the 9 justices, only Sotomayor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg signaled they opposed letting the ban take effect, of course. So it's a strong sign it will be upheld when and if the court hears the actual case. Mark Stein, thankfully not covered by any of the countries listed in the travel ban. He joins us tonight. Great to see you, Mark.
Hey, good to see you, Tucker.
What does this mean?
But he could ban me.
He could
ban me. Well, because the president, I mean, you're right, it's a big victory. But if you take it in harness with the last half hour, essentially you have had, since this administration won a year ago, the permanent bureaucracy and the courts ganging up basically to cripple the executive branch. And the fact that he had to go to court to get a temporary stay in these 2 lower-level court bans on his travel ban actually tells you something about what an insane situation we're in. The statutory language is quite plain. The president has the authority to ban by proclamation any aliens or class of aliens. So he can ban me personally by proclamation. He can ban all Canadians by proclamation. Or he can ban classes of Canadians. He can ban Canadian tap dancers because he thinks they're a threat to the American tap dancing industry. The language in the statute couldn't be plainer, and a horribly politicized judiciary, like the horribly politicized policeman you've been talking about earlier, has pushed language beyond its meaning in order to deny the president his most basic executive authority.
So here's the trend that I'm seeing. Tell me if you see it too. The least democratic parts of our government, which would be the courts and the bureaucracy, neither elected by voters, are getting more powerful, and the most democratic parts, the president and the Congress, are getting less powerful. So the democracy is actually withering right now.
Absolutely. You have a permanent state. President Obama famously said in 2009, elections have consequences. The permanent bureaucracy and the courts are saying to the people, elections have no consequences. Right. You can vote for whatever you think you want, but we're going to ban it. We're going to go ahead and conduct business as usual. And that's why this court decision is actually, the fact that it's necessary is an affront to any kind of self-government by the people and for the people.
But what's so funny? But our elites love that. I mean, it's so in their Orwellian turn, they keep warning us that the election of someone they don't like is a threat to democracy. Democracy dies in darkness. But the control of the federal government by people who've never been elected, whose names you don't know, the permanent bureaucracy, that's democracy? I mean, it's literally the opposite of what's true.
Yeah, and what's disturbing to me is you find this attitude in Brussels, for example, where there's a bunch of civil servants that seriously think they know better than the peoples of 28 nations. And the whole point about the US system is that it was created to prevent this kind of divide between the governed and the people. And this, and actually I think they should have gone further, the Supreme Court. They should have, in a sense, skipped the temporary stay and just declared that this is obviously within the terms of the President's statutory authority, and that if you object to it, you might as well do what Democrats and the civil service seem to want to do, and that is to simply pass a constitutional amendment to say that in the event, God forbid, any Republican should happen to be elected president, then the entire executive branch shall just be put in the deep freeze for 4 years and will cease to do anything whatsoever, because that's what they've been trying to do since last November.
And that's basically what's happened, unfortunately. Mark Stein, thank you. That's a deep analysis. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.